as we sing this next song, I told you guys that we were going to be doing a new one this morning, so the words will be on the screen. Follow along with us and proclaim these things as you're watching. I don't know where you find yourself mentally these last few weeks. I know, just talking amongst others, it's been difficult for everybody, I don't know what God's trying to say to you. And I know that, maybe in life with your work or your families or even within yourself, maybe you are lacking a joy that needs to return. And I want you to know that in His presence, dead things can come back to life. So as we sing this, just think about that whatever you're missing in life, or whatever you're focusing on, can't match His goodness. Nothing can come close to being as good as He is. So think about that this morning, and let whatever is dead come back to life in you. And I'll search the world, but it couldn't fill me. And man's empty praise and treasures of faith are never enough. You came along, put me back together, and every Father who resurrects dead things inside of us, that joy that was missing. We just show us how to follow you. Show us what you are trying to use for your glory. In your precious and holy name, we pray. Amen.
Amen. That's good. I love that new song. Same, like you and I are in the same boat. The blessing and graves in the gardens is just it. So if you're out there in internet world at the moment and you're like, hey, I need 2 songs for this week, we'll probably put those up at some point on social media today or this week, just to kind of link it to you. But man, such a good song and a good reminder. Hey, here's the cool thing. So when I was in college, starting off in college, I had this job where I sold knives, right? So I sold knives, and I would go like house to house selling these knives, not like door to door, like down the neighborhood, but I'd get people that would refer their friends to me, and they would say, hey, you should go sell these knives. And so part of my pitch when I was selling these knives was I would tell them, I would say, hey, I'm working on a college scholarship. Right, I'm working on a college scholarship, and so if you'll just meet with me, it helps me get this college scholarship, right? And so, while that was true, it wasn't like 100% true. I mean, it could have been 100% true, but it wasn't. You know what I'm saying? It's just kind of in the middle. So here's the thing. So like, there's a scholarship. It was like $500 that if you met with X number of people to try to sell them knives, they would give you like a $500 scholarship, right? But it was a crazy, crazy amount of people. I don't even remember the specifics of it, but it was just the way that people were like, I was in college, people were like, oh yeah, he's trying to go to college. We should probably meet with him. But the real reason I was meeting with them is I wanted to sell them knives, right? Like I wanted to sell them something because I got a commission off of it. And eventually the commission got pretty large. I was like, yeah, this is balling right here. You know what I'm saying? And so I would be like talking to these people and say, hey, I need to meet with you because I got to get this college scholarship. And in my mind, I'm like, but plot twist is coming, because when I get there, I got these bomb diggity knives, and you're going to be like, man, I got to have the knives today. Where do I sign? Here's my card. Here's my checks, all these things. Right? That's what was happening. And so plot twist is a part of my history, right? We find a similar place today. We're going to kind of walk through in the Bible, where we're going to take a look in the Bible at a story, a particular moment in the life of Jesus, and there's a plot twist. And so he's telling everybody, hey, I'm going to this funeral, and they've got in their mind, this is what's supposed to happen at this funeral. But Jesus knows in his heart, there's a different reason he's going to the funeral, right? Everyone else in his entire friend circle, everyone else that's around him, that's in the village, all these people, they have this idea of what's going to happen, why it's going to happen. But in the heart of Jesus, he's like, but I really know why I'm here, right? I really know why I'm here. Here comes this plot twist. To give you a little bit of a setting, this is late in the ministry of Jesus. And so Jesus' ministry lasts for about 3 years. And so this is on the tail end, towards the end of his ministry. And those kind of things, Mary and Martha, and so there, happens, right? And so the immediate response that we find, if you want to follow along, you can follow along in John chapter 11. The immediate response, we'll pick it up in 11 verse 4, says this. Jesus says this. When he heard this, Jesus said, this sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. So we're going to hold up that scripture on the screen just for a second, because I want you to read it again just to yourself on your phone or on your TV screen, wherever you got kind of checking in your iPad at the moment, because this is the key. Right, this is where the plot twist begins. Here, Jesus is giving us a hint. He said, hey, this sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. Right, this is the key passage. Right, Now, here's the thing. It's super rare when we're doing Bible study, when we're presenting a message, that the key piece of what's happening happens at the beginning, right? Usually, like, this story unfolds, and as it unfolds, we get to a place where it's like, okay, now we're understanding why it's happening. But Jesus, just from the very beginning, he hears this news, like, hey, let me just go ahead and give you the synopsis, the what do you call them, the cliff notes. So let me give you the central theme of what's about to unfold, right? And so not only does Jesus say this statement, Jesus then follows it up, but we're not going to go right now. We're going to wait. In fact, he waits a couple days, which, here's the thing, everybody thought this was normal because the place in which Lazarus lived, Jesus had been before. He had been in that area, and people tried to kill him. And so they're like, well, I understand why he's not going to say goodbye. He loves this guy. He's one of his best friends, but I get it. You don't want to go see, you don't want to go into while you can put yourself in danger as you go and see someone who's about to pass away, right? He's like, no, we're just going to wait 2 days. Let's wait 2 days. We fast forward a little bit. And then all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, like he wakes up one day and Jesus says to his followers, he says, hey, let's go. Let's go. Like it's time to go right now. Pack your stuff. Let's go. Right? In fact, he follows the idea of, hey, let's go. He follows it up with verse 14. He says, Lazarus is dead, and for your sake, I'm glad I was not there, so that you may believe, but let us go to him. Hold on one second, Jesus. I'm just going to call it out. For those of you who are skeptical about Jesus and the Bible, for those of you who are skeptical about Jesus and the Bible, I hear it just like you heard it. Just a second ago, Jesus specifically said, this will not end in death. You fast forward just a few verses, and Jesus says, Lazarus is dead. I hear you. I hear you. I don't get it either. But that's what Jesus says. Lazarus is dead. And then he follows it up with, and for your sake, I'm glad I was not there. Now, Jesus, you're pushing my buttons a little bit. Why would you be glad that you were not there when your friend died? That's a good question to ask. Like, what kind of Jesus are you that you would be glad that you're not there? And then he follows it up and he says, I'm glad because it's for your sake that I wasn't there. Now he's throwing everybody for a loop. He said, okay, hold on one second. So your friend is dying, and they come and tell you he's sick, he's going to die. You respond with, he ain't going to die. And then a few verses later, you say, oh, he's dead. And I'm glad that he's dead and that I wasn't there when he was dead for your sake. Talking to his friends, right? He's dead, and I'm glad that I wasn't there when he died for your sake. And I'm thinking this whole thing is just absolutely backwards. The whole thing. So then he follows it up. John 11, verse 16, we'll get to it in a second. There's a guy named Thomas. And Thomas is kind of hanging out, right? Thomas is there. He's a part of the friend group of what's happening with Jesus. And Thomas is known throughout the Bible as Doubting Thomas. After Jesus goes to the cross, there's a moment when Jesus has supposedly resurrected. And Thomas isn't buying it. He's like, look, people are telling him that Jesus is resurrected. He's like, I don't think I'm buying into this. I'm going to actually have to see some nails in his hand, nails in his feet. I'm going to have to touch those things for me to actually believe what you're saying. So he has this reputation for being this doubter, right? This doubter this whole time. But then in 11:16, Thomas actually shows a different side of what's happening. Because remember, they're reminding him, hey, if we go now, you're going into a place where people don't like you and they might kill you as well. And so Thomas, when Jesus says, hey, let's go, Thomas responds in verse 16, he says this, let us also go that we may die with him. Like, Thomas, people are you going to go into danger with, where he's likely going to get stoned, where he's likely going to be drug out of the city, and they're going to throw stones at him until he dies? How many friends are you following into that situation? You know? And Thomas is saying, hey, everybody, not just me. He's not standing up saying, hey, I'm going to go with you. I'm going to go, and I'll die with you. He's looking at all of his other friends and says, hey, y'all stand up. Let's go. Let's go, because we're going to go die with him. That's some loyalty. That's some loyalty. I think at the end of the day, what we begin to recognize is that it requires a little bit of loyalty to follow Jesus because he kind of pulls you into some pretty sticky situations. I think that loyalty also must be kind of joined with courage. Courage and loyalty, I think, goes together. It requires courage to follow Jesus, that's for sure. And so Jesus makes his way. He starts heading towards the city where Lazarus is sick, or Lazarus has now passed away because he was sick. And so Jesus is headed that way. Jesus is still outside of the city. And Martha, she runs to Jesus. As soon as she hears that Jesus is close, Martha runs to Jesus. It's now 4 days late. Lazarus has been dead 4 days. And he goes out to Jesus, and the very first thing she says when she sees Jesus, her good friend, right? Her really good friend, her rabbi, her teacher, her mentor, the very first thing she says is this, 11:21. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Let that sink in for a second. The very first thing she says when she sees Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Man, let that sink in for a second. Let it sink in for a second. All of a sudden, Jesus has face to face with him someone who's saying, I know you could have done something about this, and you didn't. And now my brother's dead, and it's your fault. And honestly, it's the truth, isn't it? All those statements are true. Jesus could have done something. Jesus could have been there and stopped it. But instead, he arrives 4 days late. 4 days late. And Martha lets him know. I find it curious, though, how Jesus responds. You wonder the humanity of Jesus, the humanity of our Lord, and just how he's going to handle this tense, emotion-filled verbiage that's kind of just thrown or just vomited on him, just if you had been here, right? And I love how he responds, and I think there's some wisdom for us to gain from it. He responds in John 11:25 and 27. Jesus said to her, he looks at her and says, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. And then he asks her, he says, do you believe this? Do you believe this? And she says, yes, Lord. Yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who has come into the world, she says. Man, did you see what Jesus did there? She takes her emotion and her anger and her blame, that she just takes off that and she puts it at the feet of Jesus. And Jesus looks at all of that there in front of him. And then he says, look, let me help her refocus on what's happening in the world. And he simply makes a declaration where he says, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And then he turns it around and says, do you believe that? Do you believe that? We might look at it and say, hey, you didn't answer her question, Jesus, or answer her accusation. I would say he's getting to it. But he wants to start with, hey, whatever I'm about to say to this accusation that it's my fault, I want to make sure that you're hearing it with honest faith. Do you really believe that I am who I say I am? Do you really believe it's my fault? Because if you honestly believe that it's my fault, then you actually do believe that I am the Son of God. And as long as we start on that equal footing, you can blame as long as there is faith with it. You can have that conversation, he's saying. But do you understand exactly who I say I am? Or are you coming at me saying, you aren't who you say you are? Because if you were, you would have been here. Those are two different arguments, right? Those are two completely different arguments. Are you acknowledging he could have done something? Or are you saying because you didn't, you can't be who you say you are? And so Jesus wants to make sure he's clear. He wants to make sure that he understands the argument that he's about to kind of get in with her, this conversation that he's going to get in with her. And say, I want to understand, where are we starting from? This is who I am. Do you believe it? Do you believe that? The simplicity of a simple question. Do you believe? Well, how about it? Do you? Yeah, I'm talking to you. Whether you're on Facebook or YouTube. I'm asking you, do you believe? Do you believe that Jesus is the resurrection and the life? Do you believe that? Some of you probably are nodding your heads or saying, yeah. But I bet there's a number of you that are watching that are shaking your head this way. And maybe you're wondering, I don't know how to go from where I am to belief. And if that's you, we want to begin that conversation this morning. We don't have magic fixes. But what we do have, our strength as a church, is our people. And we have people that are standing by right now that would love to have a conversation with you about belief. And it's simple. You can just simply text BELIEVE to 678-661-6330. We'll keep it up just for a second. And if you text that number right now, just text the word BELIEVE to that number. We've got folks that are sitting there waiting to have a conversation and respond with you. Now, for those of you who are in the room, right? You're in the room and you're already shaking your head like, yeah, I believe. I believe Jesus is the Christ. I believe that Jesus is the resurrection and the life. Could I ask you to do something in your house? I don't know. Maybe you got kids running around everywhere. Maybe that's what's happening right now. Or maybe you just chilling in your recliner, still in your fuzzy slippers and your robe. I got a really good robe, by the way. I got a brand new one. It's maroon. It's fuzzy. I'm missing it right now. I bet my wife is wearing my robe right now. Are you wearing it right now, Brooke? If you're wearing it, well, that's beside the point. Keep it on. Anyway, how so off track. See how easy this is? If you're in the room right now, and you do believe those things, I want you to do this for me. I simply want you to repeat after me. Would you do that? Just say it out loud. Say, I believe. Now y'all can do it too. Ready? Here we go. Say, I believe. That you are the Messiah. The Son of God. At home, I'm asking you, would you repeat after me? If that's what you believe, would you say it? There's going to be hundreds of people at the same time. Would you say it? Say, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God. Sometimes when doubt begins to creep in, we just need to say that out loud. Because then it helps us remember how we're approaching Jesus. It helps us to remember that, hey, I can bring my doubts to you. I can bring my hang-ups and my hiccups and all those things, all of that. I can bring them to you, but it's going to be on the foundation that you are who you say you are. You are the resurrection and you are the life. You are my resurrection and you are my life. It's a good place to start. So Mary's been sitting at home. Martha already found Jesus. Mary hears that he's arrived just outside the city. And so Mary gets up. She hears that he's here. Martha's already there. So she gets up and she runs to go find Jesus. And here's the thing. We're in John chapter 11, verse 32. Mary reaches Jesus, and this is the first thing she says. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Second time. Except this time, remember the first time, she takes the bag and she unloads it at his feet. And she's like, hey, here's my doubt and my anger and my frustration. I'm going to put it at your feet. This time, Mary gets on her knees down at his feet and says, Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. Dang. Again, notice how Jesus is going to respond. When Jesus saw her weeping, John 11:33. When Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. And he asked, where have you laid him? Come and see, Lord, they replied. And then John 11:35 simply says, Jesus wept. So the first time that he was accused of if you had only been here, he wouldn't have died. He responds with, let's make sure we're on the same page. Let me make sure that you understand exactly. I want to understand how you're coming at me, right? Let's acknowledge together that I am the resurrection and the life. And then this time, the second reaction, the first sister's still standing there. Martha's still there. So Mary comes and she gets on her knees at his feet, says the exact same thing her sister said. And then his response to her is, where have they laid him? And he's moved inside. And then it just simply says, the shortest verse in all the Bible, John 11:35, and Jesus wept. Grieving with the grieving. That's his response. Here's the thing. A lot of times when we read this, we get this idea that Jesus is weeping over Lazarus. When I read this, I don't get that sense that Jesus is weeping over Lazarus. When I read this, it says that he was moved in his spirit, that inside he was moved based upon watching the pain and anguish of the people in front of him. And that is what caused Jesus to weep. He recognized that in this community of people, this community of friends, that this sorrow and this heartbreak and this gut-wrenching feeling was in and around this village and this city and this home. And they were the people that he loved. And as they began to weep, even though he knew the plot twist that was coming, he began to weep. Not for the loss of Lazarus, because he understood he had not lost him. But he was weeping because of the heartbreak in front of him. Man, that's the kind of Jesus I want to follow. That's the kind of God that I want to worship. The type that weeps with you. Yes, Jesus weeps with you. In the middle of the storm, in the middle of this heartache, I want you to know two things. Number one, Jesus is waiting for you to acknowledge who he is. And the second piece, once you understand who Jesus is, you will then recognize that Jesus joins you in your sorrow. Jesus joins you in your heartache. Jesus weeps with you. And so Jesus begins to head towards the tomb. He arrives at the tomb in John 11:37. It says this, but some of them, people around the tomb, some of them said this, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying? This is the third time, right? This is the third time. The first time, Martha, then Mary, sisters, I get it. But now the entire crowd that's here for this time of gathering at the tomb, we would call it a funeral, this whole entire group, Jesus arrives and someone shouts out loud, hey, isn't he the guy who opens the eyes of the blind man? If he would just been here, couldn't he have kept him from dying? Where was he? For the third time, Jesus hears it. And notice how he's going to respond this time. The first time he says, hey, let's make sure we're on the same page that you really know who I am. The second one, he says, I'm going to weep with you because I'm here in the middle of your heartache. The third time, Jesus says, move the stone. Move the stone. Roll the stone away, he says. And then one of them who had so much doubt responds and says, Jesus, no. You were here. You should have been here 4 days ago when we put the body in if you wanted to say goodbye. It's not a good idea to open this stone. It's not a good idea to open the stone. Why? Because he stinks. It's been 4 days. We're in the middle of the Middle East. It's not this cool, dry climate. It's hot and humid and nasty. And there's been a body in there for 4 days. Don't open the stone. Jesus says, move the stone. Move the stone. You see, Jesus wanted everyone to know he was really dead. He wanted them to smell what death smells like. He wanted them to recognize exactly what had happened. And then Jesus prays. You ever watch that show, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Man, I loved it. I loved the lights. Right, you know what I'm talking about? I would play it all the time, and then they had a game show come out. I can't remember, it was the iPad or I don't know, somewhere I would play it. You know, you have like Phone a Friend and all those different, lifelines, that kind of thing. Do you remember the guy, John Carpenter? It was November 19th, 1999. John Carpenter made it all the way to the last question without using any lifelines. You remember that? Do you remember the episode? You probably, if you haven't seen it, when we're done, you need to YouTube it because it's just balling what happens at the end. He gets to the last question. And Regis is sitting there, and he's like, hey, he gives him the last question. I don't know what the last question is. I can't remember. But he gives him the last question, and he says, I'd like to use one of my lifelines. I'd like to phone a friend. I want to call my dad. Right? And so, sure enough, Regis is like, oh, he's going to use a lifeline, Oh, goodness, we might have stumped him here, And so let's call his dad. And so the phone rings, and his dad picks up, right? His dad picks up, and then Regis reads the question to him, reads the answers, and then, it's time for him to talk to his dad and get the answer. And then he says, Dad, actually, I'm not calling because I need help. I'm calling to tell you I just won $1 million. Mic drop, right? He hadn't answered the question yet. And then he answers it, and Regis is like, final answer? He's like, final answer. And then he wins $1 million. That's what happens in this moment. Everybody thinks that John was just like, man, this is the coolest thing ever. Listen to what Jesus does. I'm going to read it to you right out of the Bible. Listen to what Jesus does. He rolls the stone away, right? So I'm just going to read it to you. Verse 41 says, they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me. But I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe you sent me. You know, he's saying, Dad, I'm so glad you listened to me. And honestly, I'm talking to you now, but I know you've been listening to me the whole time. The only reason I'm doing this, because all y'all folks, I want y'all to make sure you understand, God's the one that made this happen. And then here's the cool thing. After he drops the mic, verse 43, he says, when he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. And the dead man came out, his hands and his feet wrapped in strips of linen and a cloth around his face. And Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. There is power in a call from Jesus. There is power when Jesus calls your name. Listen close. Through the kids screaming, through maybe the quiet of your house, listen. Do you hear Jesus calling your name? If he is, you get two choices. You can stay in the grave, or you can walk out of it alive. If he's calling your name, get up. If he's calling your name, get up. Lazarus gets up and he